Hello, MCU fans. Today we're going to take a look at the concept of Fury's Big Week and do a day-by-day breakdown of how Iron Man 2, Thor, and Incredible Hulk all weave in together to make this really cool storyline. Now, with the timeline book coming out, later this year, there's been a lot more focus on how do all these things fit together. And the timeline book for sure is going to tell us the years when things happen, as well as in many cases the months when they happen. But I really doubt it's going to do a day-by-day breakdown. I hope it does. That would be cool. But since I'm betting it doesn't, this is your chance to see how these three movies all tie together. And I thought it was really cool seeing this laid out. I mean, Marvel really thought this through. Very, very cool. So, without further ado, let's dive right in, see what we can find out. So as usual, I have to do a quick shout out to the Marvel Cinematic Universe Wiki. No big surprise. They have everything you'd ever want to know about Fury's Big Week broken down to the day. Great information. And of course, Drew, you know you're the man. Love you, man. Thank you for all your help. Also, I do want to make a quick mention. In case you noticed it, I have a new banner for the channel because my other banner was lame. I put it together myself, and I'm not a graphic artist. Big surprise, right? But we did a contest on the Discord server, and Everything Windows won. And I love this new banner that he's created. It's awesome. Thank you so much, Everything Windows, for your efforts. And he does have a YouTube channel. I've got that mentioned down below in case you want to check it out. But yeah, let me know what you think about the new banner. But I really like it. I really like it. All right, so let's dive into this. So where did this concept of Fury's Big Week first originate? Well, I can say this much. What if Episode 3 sure brought it back to the forefront again so people were talking about it? If you haven't seen this episode, go check it out. I won't do any spoilers. But in it, someone is assassinating the OG members of the Avengers. But it's mentioned in the What If episode, Day 1, Day 2, Day 3, showing how these three movies, Iron Man 2, Thor, and Incredible Hulk, are all happening at the same time. Now, I will say that the What If episode condenses the week a bit to keep the story moving forward. So don't use it as an exact guide for when everything happened. But still, it made a lot of people go, I never realized all three of these happened at the same time. But is this what created the concept of Fury's Big Week? No, actually, way back in February of 2012, there was a comic called The Avengers Prelude, but that was also named Fury's Big Week. There were 4 of them. These were tie-in comics that, at least at the time, were considered canon. I assume are still canon, and I will refer to them at times throughout this video. But it was a great comic, very, very enjoyable. You can still find it either online, digitally, or probably in your library. But this was the first time it was given a name, Fury's Big Week. And then just a few months later, right before the Avengers movie came out, Marvel released this Cinematic Universe timeline. And notice they have a section called Begin Fury's Big Week and End Fury's Big Week, and they break it down day, night, and synchronize all the movies together. So this is really my guide. If you wonder sometimes, where does the wiki get down to the day? Here's an example. I mean, Marvel did it. Marvel gave us the information. Now, other times they're guessing. Yes, that's true. Using logic, but still it's a guess. But in this case, we literally know when Marvel is saying everything happens. So very, very cool. This is the guide for the rest of this video. But then also you might say, so is that where the concept came up? No. Honestly speaking, Iron Man 2 gave us the hints that these were happening at the same time because Iron Man 2 literally shows us things happening in the Incredible Hulk movie. Here he's watching some news reports from the battle at Culver University. And they mentioned several times, both Nick Fury says it and then later Coulson, that they're having issues out in the Southwest region. That's referring to Thor. So actually, Iron Man 2 was where they canonized that these three movies are all happening at the same time. And it's pretty wild because Incredible Hulk came out in 2008, Iron Man 2 in 2010, and Thor in 2011. So 3 years worth of movies were now being retconned to happening at the same time. But the key is the comic didn't do it, and that timeline didn't do it. Iron Man 2 did it. So pretty wild, pretty wild. Okay, so let's dive into this, and we're going to look at first the portions of each movie that occur before the Fury's Big Week, because they have things that lead up to it, and then they're all happening at the same time. So we're going to do each one, and I'm just going to call it Prologue. As you see in the upper left-hand corner, Prologue. It's the prologue to Fury's Big Week. And then in the upper right-hand corner, for anybody that wants to try to watch Fury's Big Week and everything leading up to it, I'm putting the exact minutes and seconds in the movies to watch. So I'm hoping one day they do a supercut. I think that would be awesome. But this is like your preview of a supercut. But now you know how to watch them if you want to watch those exact minutes. But all right, so Thor actually has the earliest flashback all the way to 965 AD, starting in Norway and ending in Jotunheim when Odin and Loki fight. And of course, Odin takes Loki off and adopts him at this point. Then we have Incredible Hulk, also has a flashback, this one to 5 years in the past, so not all the way to 965 AD, but still 5 years in the past when we learn about his origin and when he becomes first irradiated with gamma. So that's Incredible Hulk's flashback. And then Iron Man also has a flashback to 6 months earlier than Fury's big week, where we're actually watching him say, "I am Iron Man" on TV there, as Whiplash is plotting his revenge against Stark. Okay, so those are all flashbacks. Then we move to more present day, but still not Fury's big week. A couple things need to happen first. Remember, Bruce is now living in Rio de Janeiro, working in a bottling company, and some of his blood falls into one of the bottles. Then around the same time, we have Tony Stark appearing before the Senate. And they try to, of course, take his Iron Man armor from him, and he won't let him. And then we go back to Incredible Hulk when Stan Lee has an awesome cameo getting poisoned by Banner's blood. And that leads Ross to now know where Banner is, and they have the big battle in the bottle factory, and then that leads to Bruce now heading to America. So we're kind of, all the players are coming together, right? And then we have Whiplash enacting his revenge on Tony at the Grand Prix. So those are all the things that happen before Fury's big week. And again, notice the timestamps in case you want to watch them. So to kind of bring us all together here, of the 3 movies, 51 minutes of Iron Man 2 have now transpired, 32 minutes of Incredible Hulk, and 7 minutes of Thor. And now we hit Fury's big week. So I'll say one more thing about it. This is kind of interesting. Sometimes people wonder, how does the wiki get down even and know the exact day things are happening? Well, Fury's big week is really clear because there is a deleted scene in Avengers that gives us Tony's birthday, which is listed as May 29th. And if you remember, Tony's birthday is featured, we're going to see it in just a second, on night 1 of Fury's big week. So we literally know day 1 is May 29th. The year doesn't matter. By the way, I'm not getting into the years. That's what the timeline book's going to do. I'm just going to show you this particular week. So let's dive in. Now, it's interesting. They don't really show anything that happens on day 1, although it's implied in the comic, so I will refer to the comics at times, this is from issue number 1, that Fury is monitoring Bruce Banner, Tony Stark, and Jane Foster. We know that started and has been starting for a while because, poor dude, tries to go to bed, bad idea, and they call him to let him know Tony Stark will be dead in 72 hours. And thus begins a crazy, crazy week for Nick Fury. No sleep, gets up, rock and roll. And as alluded to, sure enough, remember, Tony's birthday party. So we're still in night number 1. And that, of course, leads to Tony and Rhodey duking it out, and Rhodey ultimately taking off with the silver version of the armor. Also in night 1, the comic tells us that now Banner has cleared customs. Notice Sitwell, who's tracking Banner, has said he's now cleared customs. He's in the U.S. So all the players are in play here in the U.S. now, with Banner finally getting to America. All right, so we move to day 2. Day 2, we pick up with Thor's coronation. And, of course, that goes poorly because the Frost Giants invade. That calls off the coronation and gets Thor upset, obviously, and wanting revenge. Also in day 2, Rhodey has now arrived at the military base with the armor and hands that over. And then also, we have the infamous donut scene with Nick Fury approaching Tony Stark and ultimately giving him the temporary cure. Remember, he was being poisoned by his arc reactor, the palladium. And then that night, he watches his father's vids to try to figure out the solution to the cure that's killing him. So then, yeah, also in night 2, that is when Thor and Loki and Sif and the Warriors 3 decide to go and get revenge on the Frost Giants in Jotunheim. And you can see it looks like the sun is kind of setting. Whatever the sun is in Asgard, whatever gives them their light, is setting. So it is nighttime. And then, of course, the battle goes very poorly, and Odin has to swoop in and rescue Thor and everyone else. And this battle basically must take throughout the night and into the next day, because notice when they return to Asgard, it's now daytime. And according, again, to that timeline that Marvel put out, we're now in daytime. And so once they return, Odin is very upset with Thor. That's when he banishes Thor to the earth, and also when he sends the hammer to earth with the enchantment that you must, of course, be worthy to be able to lift it. So keep in mind, this is day 3. Now, I think it's safe to say that Asgard and the earth are on different time zones. So what may be considered day in Asgard might not be considered day on earth. And you'll see what I mean in a moment. So hang in there, but keep in mind, both Thor and the hammer are sent to earth day 3. Okay, so then we actually learned something very interesting in the Fury's Big Week tie-in comic issue number 2. We learned that Jane and Darcy and Dr. Selvig are out in the desert at this point, tracking the astronomic disturbances. And, she doesn't know what they are yet, and obviously Thor has not arrived on Earth yet, but they're already out there in the desert. But she's not the only one tracking it. We learn that Coulson is also tracking it and gives that information to Fury. And notice down in the lower left-hand corner, he literally says there is the possibility that this could be the precursor to the opening of an Einstein-Rosen bridge. So basically, he is sensing something's happening, and he wants to head out there. So this is kind of interesting because this really explains then why in Iron Man 2, Coulson explains, I'm a head out, and takes off to New Mexico because he's gotten permission from Fury to leave Stark's side and head out to try to figure out what those astronomic disturbances are. And of course, he's been tracking Jane Foster for a while, so kind of ties it in together a little bit so you at least have a better idea of what's going on in this particular scene. All right. Then Stark, of course, continues to learn from the video that he watched of his father and learn from the initial Stark Expo in 74, and he creates the new element, which allows him to avoid the poisoning from his arc reactor. And at the same time, now, remember, Banner finally arrived in America. Now he goes to Culver University, where he sees Betty Ross, doesn't approach her, but sees her and is trying to decide what to do. All right, so then night 3, this is a big day, big night. Widow makes her move on Hammer Industries and, of course, frees Rhodey. Remember, Rhodey's armor gets taken over by Whiplash, and she frees him, so they have the big battle, which, of course, there's Rhodey and Iron Man having that final battle at the Stark Expo, all on night number 3. Also on night number 3, now Coulson, who's been driving all this time, has now arrived in New Mexico. He's still 473 miles from the town that Thor is in, but he's arrived in New Mexico, and this is from issue number 2 of Fury's Big Week. Then we also see in night number 3, this is now when Thor has arrived on Earth. So remember, he was banished in day 3 from Asgard's standpoint, but he arrives on Earth night 3. So either the Rainbow Bridge takes a long, long time, or the Bifrost takes a long, long time to get you to Earth, or it's just different time zones. But it's just interesting to point out. So, of course, then after they leave with Thor, then arrives the hammer. Because remember, he sent Thor first, Odin sent Thor, and then he sent the hammer. So then they take Thor to the hospital, because they hit him. So they take him to the hospital. Also that night, we now see Banner going to visit an old friend. He's trying to decide what he should do, whether he should talk to Betty or not, etc. And Coulson now continues his journey towards the town that Thor's in and the hammer's in. And the one shot happens. A funny thing happens on the way to Thor's hammer. Notice the rocks and oil. And it's that night. And so I'm just showing this so you see that, yep, this is still nighttime. So Coulson continues his journey. And then we reach to the next day. So now we're to day 4, when Thor's hammer is now found by some locals. And Jane, quote unquote, rescues Thor from that same hospital she took him. I say rescues because she hit him again first. Then Stan Lee wrecks his truck. Remember, great cameo by Stan Lee. And finally, Coulson arrives at the hammer. So long day for Coulson of driving and a little bit of adventure there at the gas station. All right, so then Coulson ends up taking Jane's research, as you remember. And then Bruce now visits his old lab to try to get more information. And again, sees Betty, but doesn't talk to her yet. But then that night, he does run into her, and they finally reunite, which is great to see them back together again in night 4. And then also night 4, busy night, Thor tries to get his hammer and fails. Remember, he's not worthy. He's not able to get his hammer. And Coulson interrogates Thor before he finally releases him with Dr. Selvig and Jane Foster. Also in night 4, Blonsky gets his first shot of the super soldier serum. See what I mean? There is so much going on all at the same time. It's crazy. But so Blonsky gets that first shot, and then night 4, Thor spends the evening with Jane. Finally, we get to day 5. Day 5 is when Thor's friends arrive. So Sif and the Warriors 3, they all arrive. Meanwhile, you got the battle at Culver University, where Bruce heads back to Culver, ends up hulking out, has the big battle with Ross and the military, and of course, Blonsky. And at the same time, Thor's off battling the Destroyer. So there's just a lot going on at the same time. And this is what's really cool. Now you can see how these all tie together. Here's that newscast I mentioned with the lady talking about the result of the battle at Culver University. And that's on the monitor while Tony Stark is debriefing with Nick Fury. And then we get Senator Stern awarding Stark, he wasn't very happy about it, but awarding Stark and Rhodey with medals. And then in Asgard, we have Laufey now invading Asgard, and Thor, who has now dispatched the Destroyer, heads to Asgard himself. They defeat Laufey, and then Thor ends up fighting Loki. Really cool battle, and ends up with Loki's fake death number one of many. So all of that is still day 5. Crazy. Night 5. This kind of makes sense. According to issue number 3 of Fury's Big Week, S.H.I.E.L.D. recovers the Destroyer armor. I don't know that we know what they did with it. It'd be really interesting to know a little more detail on that. If you know, let me know in the comments. But kind of makes sense that they would collect it and do something with it. And then also night 5, remember that battle at Culver University? Well, when Hulk takes Betty with him and gets out of there, they end up spending the night together in a cave. Not the most comfortable way to spend the night, but still together. So then we move to day 6. In day 6, now Bruce and Betty are trying to figure out what to do, and they're hiding out in a hotel. And I'll be honest, when I watch the movie, it feels like a couple days are happening here. And nights, but nonetheless, according to the official timeline from Marvel, this is just all in day 6. So, okay, that's fine. And of course, Blonsky now revives just a day later from basically, nearly being killed at Culver University, showing that the super soldier serum is really cooking inside him. Then there's really not any night 7 or night 6. Basically, it's Betty and Bruce just spending another night on the run. Then finally on day 7, Bruce meets with Stearns, who of course is going to come back to the MCU after all these years as the leader in Captain America New World Order, or whatever name they're going to give it. But so he meets with Stearns. Stearns ends up then giving a little more of forced to give some of the blood to the Abomination, which results in the big throwdown in Harlem on night 7. And finally, we do learn in issue number 4 of Fury's Big Week what happened to Stearns. Black Widow, who's been really kind of following all this herself. She was in Iron Man 2, obviously, when now it turns out that she's collecting, if you will, Stearns, shoots him in the kneecap, poor dude. And, it'll be interesting to see when he reappears if they keep this canon. I don't know why they wouldn't. Makes a lot of sense. It's kind of interesting to think that he was held in S.H.I.E.L.D. captivity, and then, of course, S.H.I.E.L.D. had Hydra going on. So who knows what happened to Stearns. I really hope they fill us in. It'll be really interesting. And that finally ends Fury's Big Week. So then we move to a little bit of an epilogue, if you will, to Fury's Big Week, where each movie has just a few minutes of follow-up. We see that Bruce now is on the run again and has learned to control his transformations. We see that Coulson meets with Sitwell to try to decide what to do about Abomination and Ross. And of course, he sends Tony in to go talk to Ross, which was from the Incredible Hulk movie, but was recontextualized in the Consultant one-shot. And we end up in Thor, where Dr. Selvig is looking over the Tesseract, and of course, Loki is exerting his control. Okay, so at a high level then, what on earth, right? Look at this. Isn't this crazy? Day 1 was just from the Iron Man movie. Day 2, Thor, then Iron Man, then Thor. Day 3 is nuts. Thor, then Iron Man, then Hulk, then Iron Man, then Thor, then Hulk, and then the one-shot. A funny thing on the way to Thor's hammer. Day 4, now we're just going back and forth between Thor, Hulk, Thor, Hulk, Thor. Day 5, all the movies end up showing up again, although remember, the only thing that Iron Man had was really a debrief. So for the most part, the story is Thor and Hulk, and then day 6 and day 7 are just Hulk. So you can see why it's tricky to figure out which of these movies to start with. Like if you're not going to do a supercut, right, and you're just going to watch one movie, then the next one, then the next one, what do you watch first? I mean, do you watch Iron Man 2 since it ends before the rest of them? Do you watch that one first? Or do you watch Hulk because it actually starts a little earlier but ends way later? I don't know. It's, pick an order. But probably the best order to watch it is in the Fury's Big Week supercut order. So now you know how to do it if you're interested. So there you go. In fact, if somebody wants to create that supercut, let me know. I'd love to watch it. All right, so leave your comments down below. Tell me whether you found this interesting. I sure did. I enjoyed putting it together. I hope you enjoyed it as well. Don't forget, we do have a Discord server. I mention this in every video. I will put a pinned comment with a link if you want to join. Over 600 folks from around the globe with great conversations. Also, if you don't mind, like this video, subscribe if you haven't already. You can check out more content, and we can all continue to enjoy the ever-growing, ever-changing Marvel Cinematic Universe.